All right, so this quick video segment here is talking about flight controllers. This is a topic we're going to cover a lot more in depth later in the class as we build our quadcopters. But whether you're building a quadcopter or a fixed wing aircraft, you may use a flight controller at some point to give your aircraft some extra abilities, we'll say. Okay, flight controllers are commonly used to gain autonomy for these unmanned aerial systems. They're essential for quadcopters to even really fly at all, and they're really helpful for planes or fixed-wing aircraft to, do those autonomous things that we want drones to do, fly by themselves. Okay. Also for VTOL aircraft, vertical takeoff or landing, they are essential as well. Okay, so a flight controller is kind of like a small computer on your aircraft. Okay, here's just a photograph of some different flight controllers. These are all from one company called Maytech. We will use a flight controller from Maytech in this class to set up and configure on our quadcopter. We don't need to know too much about them right now, like I said, but we will want to recognize that they are part of the system. Okay, if you remember back to the discussion on transmitters and receivers, we talked about having a plane in that example, and you say, well, here's a basic RC plane, and you just control it with the transmitter in your hand, the receiver on the plane, and then all the parts that move on the plane. That's it, okay? Now that's fine, but if you want that aircraft to have some autonomy, you need to put a flight controller in there to give it some more advanced abilities to sense what it's doing and to control what it's doing by itself, make decisions based on inputs and things like that. Okay, for a quadcopter, a flight controller is basically essential. Okay, we'll talk about why how quadcopters work a bit in class as well later on. But essentially, you have these four motors that are all spinning at the same time. There's actually two spinning in one direction, two spinning in the other direction, okay, which you may or may not have realized. But the flight controller has to balance those four motors and their speeds and thrust and everything all the time in order for the quadcopter to stay nice and stable. If you've flown the Holy Stone in the intro class, you fly your Holy Stone around and it's fairly stable. I mean, it doesn't just instantly crash usually, um, but it's there and it can hover, and that's because of the flight controller is balancing those motor outputs like faster than we can even think about it in order for it to stay nice and level. One motor's not spinning faster than the others and flipping the thing over. One motor's not going too slow and letting that side dip. Okay. So a flight controller is in charge of that, and basically taking your inputs. You say, I want to go forward, or I want to go sideways, or I want to spin, or go up and down, or whatever it is. Taking your inputs and saying, okay, if you want to go up, that means I have to do X, Y, Z thing with all four of these motors right now. Or you want to turn, you want to go to the side. That means these two motors have to do this, and these two motors have to do this. And so a flight controller really is essential for a quadcopter to fly. There's not a good way for humans to kind of move things fast enough to fly a quadcopter without the flight controller being on board and kind of helping us out with that. We just can't control all four of those motors individually fast enough to really fly very well. And so the flight control we'll use this semester is actually this one here in the middle. At this time, if you're watching this video sometime in the future, you might have a different flight controller, but the H743 Slim is a flight controller that we'll use this semester to run ArduPilot, which is a piece of software firmware that we'll use on our flight controller in order to fly our quadcopter, so it'll work. Okay. You may also sometimes see things like this in the world of fixed wing or plane, or airplane type drones. Not really drones per se, but just RC airplanes is more common. And these are sometimes referred to as stabilizer boards or gyros, is often a name people give them as well, because some of the components they have on board, one of them is a gyroscope. But what these do is basically they have some abilities to help you fly your plane better, to help it level out by itself and things like that. But they're not quite as advanced in many ways as a flight controller. And these are kind of my terms. Technically, these all right here on this page are flight controllers in some way because they control your plane to some extent without you having to do so. But I kind of differentiate those because none of these ones on this page really have the full suite of abilities that most flight controllers have, that you'll see on this page. So a little bit difference there, apples and oranges, I don't know, but you will see these sometimes in the world of fixed wing. If you flew the Aero Scout with the Intro Lab or in your own Aero Scout, you had one of these on board most likely, this one on the bottom right, which is a receiver stabilizer combo in one package there. Okay, so there's that. Um, the last piece here we want to talk about is VTOL. Okay, unfortunately, we aren't building VTOLs in this class. That is a pretty cool thing we could do um, in the world of drones, right? But we in this class we're just focused on quadcopters. If you gain the skills to build a quadcopter and you learn how to build a plane and you put them both together, there's your VTOL, right? You can build a vertical takeoff or landing aircraft that can take off like a quadcopter and then go into airplane mode basically, fly around and then come back and land in quadcopter mode. So those are pretty cool. They have kind of a mix of both of these types of aircraft as well as some other advanced features sometimes that are really cool. Okay. Um, and basically in a VTOL, you have the components for, here listed here, basically for a quadcopter and a plane kind of smashed together or put together to give you the abilities that a VTOL does. So, all right. Okay, that should wrap up our UAS Basics lecture series here. Hopefully the videos have been helpful and informative. Remember to read the pages in your textbook as well as those notes there so you can be able to answer the questions on the quiz, okay, or quizzes. And once you have that under your belt, you'll have a good basic knowledge of a lot of these components, which is important because as we go through the class, I'm going to refer to the components lots of different times. And if you don't know what I'm talking about because you didn't learn it, then it'll be harder for you to follow what everyone else is doing. So, all right, we will see you in class. Thanks.